Nana Shastra Vicharanaka Nipano Sakarma Samstahaka Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Vanya Sharanya Kara Radha Krishna Radharavendra Bhajana Nandena Mataliko Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyaga Shri Jiva Gopalaka Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyaga Shri Jiva Gopalaka. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the 6 Goswamis, namely Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they're honored all over the 3 worlds, and they're worth taking shelter of because they're absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastityadesha Tarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda Ki. Yes, so we spent last night on chapter 15. And again, we were really trying to clarify what is rag. This is the essence of this, the understanding here, what is rag. And then it's a question of who has it and who wants it. 2 different categories. Those who have it are rag atmic, and those who want it are rag anuga. We're going to come on to those ones. Well, we'll see, maybe this evening, but I think probably more on Monday. So yes, and then we discussed about certain people who have rag. It's pretty clear they have rag, meaning an overwhelming attachment to Krishna in one way or another. But some of them are devotees and some of them are not devotees. Yes, some of them, they hate Krishna. They're envious of Krishna, or they're afraid of Krishna. They don't have love. Therefore, even though they've got the type of rag attraction or attachment, they can't be considered devotees, and what they're doing cannot be considered devotional service. Yes, so those personalities, of course, the ones who are not devotees, but still they had such a powerful attachment to the Lord, just sort of obscured everything else. That was Kamsa and Shishupal. And then the examples, at least the examples we were given in the Srimad Bhagavatam verse, 7:1-30, they were the gopis and basically the Yadus, the members of the Yadu dynasty. All right, so we are going on to the section which is titled Sensual Attraction. And, well, this is specifically about those who are, we did mention the term last night, they are calm atmic. Atmic meaning within themselves they have calm what is apparently lust. But of course we read last night, Prabhupada made it very clear that it's not lust. You can't call it lust. That's just really, it's really unfair. And it's just totally inaccurate. So these things we will explore this evening. Yes, it should be an interesting little discussion. So, all right. So we go into the section, part 3. Well, I call it part 3, but in the book it's just sensual attraction. And Prabhupada gives a little summary. Let's read it, it's nice. This extreme desire to serve the Lord is manifest in the transcendental land of Vraja, and it is specifically manifested among the gopis. The gopis' love for Krishna is so elevated that for our understanding it is sometimes explained as being, quote unquote, lusty desire. Yes, so we're all familiar enough, no doubt, with what is lusty desire, particularly of this sort, meaning between male and female, some sort of sexually oriented type of attraction or attachment. This is not some new subject to us, what goes on in the material world. Srila Prabhupada makes the point, not here but elsewhere, about that material lust. It's kind of, well, it's just like actually the walking propensity, if you remember that from the beginning, around the beginning, that the tendency to take to devotional service is natural. It's built into us, just like the tendency for a child to start walking is built into the child. It's just part of the child's nature. So Prabhupada says similarly, the tendency to be attracted to the opposite sex is just built in. It's just part of the, not even just human. Oh, Krishna. This thing backfired on us. Sorry. That must be how it happened. But it happened. Okay, and we carry on and pray to the Lord. All right, yes, so the tendency to become sexually attracted is just built in. It's part of human nature, just like that tendency to walk. And Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, his sense of humor and the way he used humor to make points and to make things clear. Srila Prabhupada in at least one place I remember reading some time ago, Prabhupada said, "You do not need to go to school or university to learn how to become attracted to the opposite sex." Oh, that's just a Prabhupada-ism. Yes. So we all know what that is. And the attraction between the gopis and Krishna, at least to the uninformed, it looks like that. And therefore, so many people who have, they're not actually really qualified, but they have some idea about who is Krishna and who are the gopis. I would say that, as I understand at least, that the majority of those people, even the vast majority, they think that it's just some version of male-female attraction. But it's not. It's something very different. But the problem, or one of the problems, is it can only be appreciated for what it is. Very sublime, amazing, wonderfully pure love. It can only be appreciated like that by people who have made at least some advancement spiritually, some Krishna conscious advancement. There's one little story, I don't know if you heard or not, but Srila Prabhupada was attending some program where there were some of these scholars who, they call them Indologists. They're Westerners, but they're just somehow or other, they're interested in Indian philosophy, Indian things, Indian history and Indian different things. And some of them are interested in these things. So Prabhupada was attending some program, and there was at least one of this type of person there. And that man, approached Prabhupada, and he said to Prabhupada that, this Radha Krishna Leela, it's really the male-female scene. Yes, hot stuff. He said, and he said, it's not suitable for brahmacharis, is it? Meaning celibate students who don't have involvement in these things at all, and no connections with the opposite sex. So he said like that these things should not be read by brahmacharis because they're too, just sexual, sensual. And Srila Prabhupada responded, actually, only brahmacharis should read them. Means only people who are really spiritually focused and purified, at least reasonably purified. So we go on to the second paragraph of this section, is actually paragraph 14. Anyway, let's just say the second paragraph here. And Srila Prabhupada paraphrases a verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita. It is, just for your interest, it's the Adi Leela, chapter 4, verse 165. And I can read, let me just read the verse itself. Atmendriya pritivancha tare bali kama, krishnendriya, priti icha, dare prema nama. And well, we see there how Srila Prabhupada has translated this verse. I mean, sort of paraphrased the verse, but yeah, just give me a second here. In Nectar of Devotion as such, Prabhupada gives the translation that lusty desire refers to the desire to gratify one's personal senses, and transcendental desire refers to the desire for serving the senses of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada there, he makes the point that actually in the material world, you don't really find that people sincerely and genuinely want to satisfy the senses of someone else. Generally, in material life, everyone is more or less just simply interested in satisfying their own senses. This is how things work in material life. On the material level, the pure feelings, the pure emotions that are there in pure devotional service and displayed constantly in the spiritual world, in Goloka Vrindavan, in this material world, those things become corrupted. They become corrupted. So therefore, in this world, generally, you cannot really find something like pure love. When we say pure love, what do we mean? What are we referring to? Pure love means that one simply wants to satisfy, please the beloved, with no interest for oneself. Will I feel good? Will I not feel good? How will I feel? This is not these things are not considerations. The only consideration is, how will my beloved feel? How can I please satisfy my beloved so my beloved will be happy? And Srila Prabhupada, talking about this, Srila Prabhupada gave an example, and it's quite an example, that, this first point he didn't make, but the point is there, that to our knowledge, the biggest killer of human beings is not war, it's not COVID, it's not COVID, Hare Krishna. It's not disease. It's not old age either. To our knowledge, the biggest killer of human beings is abortion. At least we've heard that. I'm sure someone could do some research and get some more specific information, but definitely it's big. It's really big. And what does abortion mean? It means the mother is arranging, at least, for the killing of her child. So, but what Prabhupada said was that in this material world, the closest thing to pure love is the love of a mother for her child. And indeed, we hear sometimes of mothers, human beings, mothers, for example, running into burning buildings to save their child, or just running into some extremely risky situation just to save the child. So, that's got, as Prabhupada said, that is the closest thing generally within the material world to pure love. But then, having said that, the biggest killer of human beings is abortion, or in other words, the mothers having their children killed. It's amazing. One devotee told me quite some years ago, a Prabhupada disciple, that just before he became a devotee, on his 21st birthday is taken to be very significant. So on his 21st birthday, his mother's mother, his maternal grandmother, told him that, I've waited till now, but now I want to tell you something very special. So she told him that when your mother, her daughter, the older lady's daughter, when my daughter was pregnant with you, she wanted to have you aborted, but I convinced her not to. And this devotee, I won't mention his name, he's alive, Prabhupada disciple, quite prominent. He told us that when his grandmother told him that, it changed his perspective on his mother quite dramatically. He really saw her in a different light, not such a wonderful light. So this is the thing. In the material world, you don't really get pure love. Sometimes you see some resemblance in certain relationship situations, like mothers with their children, for example, sometimes. But otherwise, relationships basically mean, are you satisfying me? And you are thinking, am I becoming satisfied by you? And if no, or if, one finds more satisfaction elsewhere, then so often the relationships break. So often. When I became a devotee, I had some close friends, a few really close friends. As soon as I became a devotee, they've had no contact with me at all. Yeah. Whereas at least one other person who was a friend, he became interested in Krishna consciousness, and so we developed a very friendly, an even more friendly relationship. Oh well, anyway, so now the thing is that this is what is discussed in the second paragraph under the heading of sensual attraction. In the material world, there's no such thing as a lover's wanting to please the senses of his beloved. Actually, in the material world, everyone wants mainly to gratify his own personal senses. The gopis, however, wanted nothing at all but to gratify the senses of the Lord. And there is no instance of this in the material world. Therefore, the gopis' ecstatic love for Krishna is sometimes described by scholars as being like the lusty desire of the material world. But actually, this should not be taken as a literal fact. It is simply a way of trying to understand the transcendental situation. Now, to bring this point out, because, this is just really so essential. It is just so essential. I want to read some verses from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 4. And it's specifically discussing the love of the gopis for Krishna, and just illustrating further what we've just we just read about just a minute ago. All right, so here we go. Listen to this. The object of lust is only the enjoyment of one's own senses, but love caters to the enjoyment of Lord Krishna, and thus it is very powerful. Social customs, scriptural injunctions, bodily demands, fruit of action, shyness, patience, bodily pleasures, self-gratification, and the path of varnashram dharma, which is difficult to give up. The gopis have forsaken all these, along with their families. They've forsaken their families and suffered their relatives' punishment and scolding, all for the sake of serving Lord Krishna. They render loving service to him for the sake of his enjoyment. That is called firm attachment to Lord Krishna. It is spotlessly pure, like a clean cloth that has no stain. Therefore, lust and love are quite different. Lust is like dense darkness, but love is like the bright sun. Thus, there is not the slightest taint of lust in the gopis' love. Their relationship with Krishna is only for the sake of his enjoyment. And a verse from Bhagavatam is quoted. The gopis are addressing Krishna. "O dearly beloved, your lotus feet are so soft that we place them gently on our breasts, fearing that your feet will be hurt. Our life rests only in you. Our minds, therefore, are filled with anxiety that your tender feet might be wounded by pebbles as you roam about on the forest path." So then he continues, "The gopis do not care for their own pleasures or pains. All their physical and mental activities are directed toward offering enjoyment to Lord Krishna. Whatever affection we see the gopis show for their own bodies, know it for certain to be only for the sake of Lord Krishna. The gopis think, I have offered this body to Lord Krishna. He is its owner, and it brings him enjoyment. Krishna finds joy in seeing and touching this body, means that particular gopi, her body. Krishna finds joy in seeing and touching this body. It is for this reason that they cleanse and decorate their bodies. Yes, amazing. That's just to help us appreciate a little more clearly how these things are working. Oh my gosh. Okay. And here's something else. This is also from chapter 4 of the Adi Leela. It's pretty much right at the beginning of the Adi Leela of the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita. Listen to this. There is another wonderful feature of the emotion of the gopis. Its power is beyond the comprehension of the intelligence. When the gopis see Lord Krishna, they derive unbounded bliss, although they have no desire for such pleasure. The gopis taste a pleasure 10 million times greater than the pleasure Lord Krishna derives from seeing them. The gopis have no inclination for their own enjoyment, and yet their joy increases. That is indeed a contradiction. So they're not interested in enjoying. They have no interest in enjoying, but still their enjoyment increases. It is a contradiction. For this contradiction, I see only one solution. The joy of the gopis lies in the joy of their beloved Krishna. When Lord Krishna sees the gopis, his joy increases, and his unparalleled sweetness increases also. The gopis think, Krishna has obtained so much pleasure by seeing me. That thought increases the fullness and beauty of their faces and bodies. So the gopis see how Krishna is enjoying their beauty. And so they think, oh, Krishna has enjoyed so much pleasure just by seeing me. And when they think like that, then their beauty increases. The fullness and beauty of their faces and bodies increases. The beauty of Lord Krishna increases at the sight of the beauty of the gopis. And the more the gopis see Lord Krishna's beauty, the more their beauty increases. In this way, a competition takes place between them, in which no one acknowledges defeat. Krishna, however, derives pleasure from the beauty and good qualities of the gopis. And when the gopis see his pleasure, their joy increases. Therefore, we find that the joy of the gopis nourishes the joy of Lord Krishna. For that reason, the fault of lust is not present in their love. Hare Krishna. So let's go on to the 15th paragraph. It is 15th, but it's the third paragraph under the heading Sensual Attraction. And here, in order to, establish further and clarify this point that the so-called lusty desire of the gopis in relation to Krishna, that it's not lust, it's not material, but it's simply purely spiritual. In order to make this point even more clear and to actually provide, you could say, some proof of that. So Srila Prabhupada gives two examples of people, very prominent people, who appreciated the gopis in terms of their selfless love for Krishna, and didn't at all think that they're just girls attracted to a boy. So the first one is Uddhava. Uddhava is a very dear friend of Krishna in Dwaraka. In fact, in Dwaraka, Uddhava is the highest, which means that outside of Vrindavan, Uddhava is the highest, basically. So Uddhava, he was Krishna's counselor, like sort of prime minister, advisor type person, when Krishna was there in Dwaraka. And Uddhava, when just after Lord Krishna left Vrindavan and went to Mathura and settled in Mathura, so Lord Krishna sent Uddhava to Vrindavan with messages for the different Brijbasis, including messages for the gopis, because Krishna felt he is the best one to represent me. That was one thing. The other thing was that he wanted Uddhava to see the gopis and to appreciate their devotion to Krishna, their love for Krishna. And this would be a stimulus for Uddhava to progress further in Krishna consciousness. So therefore Uddhava went, and if you know the story, eventually he ended up in Nandagram, which is part of the Vrindavan area. Nandagram, Krishna, that's where Krishna was living. That's where Krishna was living immediately before he left Vrindavan. He was living in Nandagram. And therefore, all the Brijbasis were living in Nandagram, in or just around Nandagram, including the gopis. They were living there also, in Nandagram. So Uddhava went there to Nandagram. He found the gopis in a place called Uddhava Kyari. And he delivered the message or messages of Krishna to the gopis. And he saw that the gopis were not very impressed. He saw a few things, actually. It's all described in Srimad Bhagavatam. One thing he saw was that there was a bumblebee buzzing around the gopis, and particularly buzzing around Srimati Radharani. And Srimati Radharani, somehow or other, she entered into a sort of an altered state of consciousness, thinking that the bee was a servant or a messenger from Krishna. And so initially she started chastising the bee, saying that, we know who you are. We know who you are. You're Krishna's messenger, and, who needs you? Krishna left us, so why is he sending us messages? So we don't need you, so who are you? And she said that actually you're very similar to Krishna. Because Krishna, of course, has a blackish body, but he wears a golden dhoti. And the bee has bands, black band, yellow band, black band, yellow band of color. So Radharani, in her actual transcendental madness, she said, "You even look like your master. You even look like your master." And she said that you have the same nature as your master, as he would go from one gopi to another. He would go to one gopi, extract as much enjoyment from her as possible, and go to the next gopi, and then extract pleasure from her, and then leave her and go to the next one. So Radharani said to the bee, "You're just the same. You go from flower to flower, and you extract the nectar from one flower, and as soon as you've taken it all and the flower is now bereft, you go to the next flower and extract the nectar from there, and when you've taken all the nectar from there, you go to the following flower." So she said, "You're just like Krishna in so many ways." And Uddhava was watching this. And then Radharani said, it's a sort of a famous line. She told the bee, "You are the unreliable servant of an unreliable master." And then the bee flew off. And suddenly Radharani became anxious. I was just criticizing Krishna. And this bee, she's thinking, was a messenger from Krishna. The bee may go back and tell Krishna all the bad things I've been saying about him. Oh no, that's terrible. She became anxious. But then the bee returned. And then Srimati Radharani, she started flattering the bee. "Oh, you're so nice. Just as your wonderful master Krishna makes beautiful music by playing on the flute, you make beautiful music by your buzzing." And like this, different things she said, with the idea that if the bee is she thinks the bee is a messenger. So if the bee goes back, he'll say good things to Krishna, and Radharani will be in Krishna's good books. So anyway, that's sort of the story briefly, but basically, Uddhava watching this, Uddhava was completely astonished. He'd never seen such elevated Krishna consciousness. Therefore, here Prabhupada says in the third paragraph, under sensual attraction, great devotees up to the standard of Uddhava are very dear friends of the Lord, and they desire to follow in the footsteps of the gopis. So the gopis' love for Krishna is certainly not material, lusty desire. Because how could a devotee like Uddhava, he's so elevated, how would he be interested in the attitudes of the gopis towards Krishna if they're materialistic? But rather, Uddhava, when he was traveling back from Nandagram back to Mathura, after having delivered the messages, Uddhava, he passed by Govardhan Hill, and some of you may have been there, I'm sure. There's a place called Uddhava Kund. And there, Uddhava stopped and just started thinking about what amazing devotees these gopis are. And he prayed that I want to take birth in Vrindavan as grass, or little, like little bushes, little shrubs that just grow on the ground level. I want to take birth in these forms so that the gopis may step on me and I'll get the dust from their lotus feet. And even if they don't step on me, then if they walk somewhere just nearby, not too far away, and they kick up some dust, maybe some of that dust will be carried by the wind and it'll land on me. This was Uddhava's prayer, and these things are in Srimad Bhagavatam. So, and they say that the grass and the shrubs at Uddhava Kund is Uddhava. Yes, that's what they say. So if the attitude of the gopis towards Krishna is just material lust, how on earth is someone like Uddhava going to have this sort of interest in them? He won't have that sort of interest. He'll reject them completely. And similarly, the second case of someone who worshipped the gopis and appreciated the gopis is none other than Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya, of course, he was very strict as a sannyasi, extremely strict. But he taught that the best method of worshipping Krishna is the method of the gopis. And what does that mean, the method of the gopis? It just means their conjugal love, their conjugal attitudes, their dancing with him and embracing him, all these conjugal things. That's what that's how the gopis worshipped Krishna. So that's the highest form of worship of Krishna according to Lord Chaitanya. So therefore we can understand that the love of the gopis is rag atmik, bhakti. It's not like some lusty rag, some lusty attraction or attachment, which some materialistic people, or so many materialistic people, feel. It is actually a very deep and powerful attraction to serve Krishna and please Krishna, but in the conjugal sort of mode of existence. Yes, so these examples, then, couple of examples, they prove that the love of the gopis, that the gopis have no lust. But like we said, Prabhupada says that the use of this term kam, lusty desire, kamatmik, people who have lust, the usage of that term, Prabhupada explains here, that the gopis' ecstatic love for Krishna is sometimes described by scholars as being like the lusty desire of the material world. But actually, this should not be taken as a literal fact. It is simply a way of trying to understand the transcendental situation. Okay. Just one thing I can mention You know, we have to give you like special questions. I want to give you a special question in regard to this whole subject of the gopis and their attraction to Krishna, spontaneous karmatmic attraction. So the idea here in this verse, which I'm just going to give you now, it's Madhya Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita 21,119. 21,119 Madhya Lila. And it says, the transcendental mellows generated from the dealings between the gopis and Krishna cannot be tasted by means of fruitive activity, yogic austerities, speculative knowledge, regulative devotional service, mantra yoga, or meditation. This sweetness can be tasted only through the spontaneous love of liberated persons who chant the holy names with great ecstatic love. So that's the verse, Madhya Lila 21,119. Write it down, because you're going to be asked a question about that. Believe me. Okay, then we just carry on here. The next paragraph, just a small paragraph, the last paragraph in the chapter. And Prabhupada discusses the actual lusty desire, the actual lusty desire of Kubja, who met Krishna when Krishna entered Mathura. Having just left Vrindavan, he entered Mathura. And it's a bit of a long story, but at some point he met Kubja, and we won't go through the whole thing, but she became attracted to him in a lusty way, apparently. And and she invited Krishna, please come to my place. And Krishna, you know, if she had simply been lusty only, materialist, Krishna would have said, forget it. But because through contact with Krishna, there was a change within her heart, Krishna agreed, I'll come and visit you later. Because he hadn't killed Kamsa yet, I think. Anyway, he said he'd come later. And he did go later. And there's an interesting discussion in Gopal Champu about what happened to Kubja and why did Krishna go back. It's really, it's quite something. So there it said, if a poor person is seen by a merciful person, the merciful person's powers will be controlled by the poor person. Therefore, Krishna, who's the merciful person, glanced at Kubja, who was the poor, spiritually poor person, in a merciful way, and he became a little controlled by her. And thus he gave her his mercy, and she became pure. Therefore he went back, because she had become pure. And there's another question here. How's this? This is Madhya Lila 8, 217. Note that, Madhya Lila 8, 217. Lusty desires are experienced when one is concerned with his own personal sense gratification. The mood of the gopis is not like that. Their only desire is to satisfy the senses of Krishna. So anyway, you have two devotees doing Bhakti Shastri. There's the question here. And the question is, how are lusty desires experienced? That's the question. How do you experience lusty desires? Anyway, you go to that verse and you find it, and you'll see there the answer. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 15. That's the end of chapter 15. So I guess we will go on. We'll go on tomorrow. On Monday, actually. We'll go on Monday into chapter 16, which is all about Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. This chapter we've just been reading, it's all about Ragatmik, those people, particularly the Brijbasis, who have Rag for Krishna already within themselves. Now we're going to go on to a discussion about devotees who have some attraction, but they want to develop it and become Rag Atmik. One thing I'll mention, let me just mention it here. If we go into chapter 6, just have a look in chapter 16. You'll see the first little section, it's only 2 paragraphs. It's called Relationship. This is actually about Rag Atmik devotional service. Actually, it belongs in chapter 15. It belongs in chapter 15. It's not about Raganuga. It is about Rag Atmik. But in terms of what they call relationship, if you remember, Samband Atmik. Sambandha, meaning relationship. Atmik. In their hearts, within themselves, they have intimate, not conjugal, but more like family relationship with Krishna. And so Prabhupada points out, it refers to people like Nanda Maharaj, Mother Yashoda, the Vrishnis, Krishna's relatives in Dwarika, people like that. People like that. They have generally, not always, but generally, some type of family relationship with Krishna, and therefore they are Rag Atmik. So, yeah. Okay. So we'll carry on on Monday, chapter 16, and we'll particularly focus on eligibility for spontaneous devotional service. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.